How's it going, Critter Family? I hope you all are doing well. I hope you're having fun during this holiday weekend, this Thanksgiving weekend and Black Friday weekend. Be safe if you are going out. Enjoy time with your family. For those of you that don't celebrate Thanksgiving, then happy regular Thursday. Hope you still have a wonderful weekend. Today we're going over a video that was suggested to me by someone on the channel. This is the Yorkshire Canine Academy. How I made my dog reactive, avoid these huge mistakes. So, let's see what he has to say. I'm not a huge fan of his, if you haven't already seen the first video I did on him, so let's just see.
In 2016, I adopted Ranger from the local dog pound. His mum had been relinquished, and while she was there, she had 8 puppies. They were crossbreeds, mainly Staffy, German Shepherd. We immediately dove into training, teaching him commands like paw, sit, down, and roll over. We thought we were doing everything right.
So those sound like tricks. I would say cues or tricks, not commands.
Books like Easy Peasy Puppy Squeezy and becoming big fans of Zak George on YouTube.
Okay, why the hell does everybody hate Zak George? Zak George has done nothing to hurt anybody. He's trying to open up everybody's eyes to the more aggressive, unnecessary techniques that this here Mr. Man does. So, failed positive reinforcement trainer.
Owners do. However, fast forward 6 months and that's when the reactivity kicked in. First it was black dogs, then it was bigger dogs, and then it was male dogs, and eventually all dogs. I followed all the rules. I did my homework, I let him play with other dogs to socialize him, I even used a harness. But still, the reactivity persisted.
So, socializing, and even if you think you're doing everything right, everything you've been told, it depends on what you've been told. And by whom. Just because you watch videos that by Zak George and you want to blame him for your faults, it doesn't mean that, you can't hold yourself accountable. That things just happen. At 6 to 7 months, reactivity can be not a fact that you failed your dog, even if you did everything right and you actually were doing it right. By right, I mean you have proper timing, you have leash skills where you can teach your dog to be loose on leash without having to use aversive techniques or methods. You can, work with your dog and your dog wants to work with you and you're not working against each other. You're not forcing your dog. Say you do everything right in that aspect, where you do everything to benefit the dog in a way that, that still includes limitations, okay? When I teach and when I say I teach to benefit the animal, it doesn't just mean I'm doing anything that the animal wants. I'm doing it to keep the animal safe. That also benefits the animal as safety, as well as things that they find enjoyable. So, say you did everything right. Sometimes 7 to 9 months, the dogs, they'll be going through a fear imprint stage, but sometimes that's when you can find reactivity that you can't prevent. You couldn't have prevented. As the dog matures, it's very rare, but there have been cases of behavioral euthanization happens because there's just something in the brain that is wired wrong. And no matter what you do, even if you work with a veterinary applied animal behaviorist, the top of the top, the dog psychologists out there, the real ones, the ones that are actually educated and have their background and their degrees in it, not just people who call themselves behaviorists. If you go to a veterinary applied animal behaviorist, and they even can't help you. And sometimes there's cases where they cannot be helped, and it depends on it could be nature and nurture. The dog's breeding and how they were raised. So even if you do everything right, it could just be that this dog was never going to thrive without having to be locked up or have a muzzle on. And no matter how many hours and countless days and weeks and years you put into these dogs, even using positive reinforcement, because aversive would only make it worse. No matter what you do, you can't make this dog safe for the public. Now, these are very few and far between. There have only been 2 dogs that I have worked with that I felt, obviously I couldn't help, so I recommended them to the owners to a veterinary applied animal behaviorist to help them. And if they couldn't help them, then that might be a case of behavioral euthanization, because this dog, these 2 dogs that I'm thinking of were very unpredictable And that's a very dangerous thing. And for me, dogs are very predictable. You know, there's a saying out there, people used to say that, oh, the most predictable thing about an animal is they're unpredictable. No, they're very predictable. If you understand them, you understand how they work, you understand the timing of things and how they think and how they live and what's natural for them, whether they've been domesticated or not. So, unfortunately for those two dogs, I don't know where they are. I hope that they're well, you know, and it doesn't mean that we can't still hold ourselves accountable for what we did do or what we tried. The animal doesn't care what we try, they care what we do. So, anyway, enough of that tangent. Let's continue with what he's saying. So I'm just saying that, long story short, even if you did everything right, sometimes it can't be helped.
Well, here's the thing. I didn't do anything right at all. I listened to the wrong information, and that's not my
Says
fault.
who?
It's a common mistake.
Okay, so now he's not going to take any accountability, so screw you, dude. So you're going to say that you did everything right, but no, you did everything wrong by listening to Zak George, who doesn't know you exist, or at the time, you know, you're just following a person's advice, a stranger's advice on the internet, who is not there to physically help you. You followed online advice. You didn't actually get, you know, to work one-on-one with a professional that is educated, that has an educational background, that is, you know, actually studied appropriate studies and science-based. You're going to blame it on the harness. You're going to blame it on socializing him with other puppies. And you're going to blame it on all this free information on the internet that you don't know are there good sources or not. Because there is so many sources out there. There's so many free sources that it's easy to blame everybody else but yourself. So this guy doesn't blame himself, really. I mean, he's going to act like he does. But he doesn't. He says, "Oh, I failed my dog because I listened to the wrong source." No, you failed your dog because you didn't listen to your dog, what your dog needed. You didn't actually ask for professional help. It doesn't sound like it. He may explain it here in a minute, but you didn't ask for professional help from an actual professional who knows what they're doing. You have to do a lot more research. So my own Shiba was reactive to a point. Yeah, that was my fault. You know what? I fixed it. Not through aggression, not through negative reinforcement or positive punishment or any of this other nonsense. I used positive reinforcement. A PetSmart trainer taught me how to work with my aggressive reactive dog. Because guess what? Prong collars and choke chains and all that other baloney made him worse. Because I listened to uneducated, dumb people who made my dog worse. And then I went to an actually educated person at PetSmart. Not only through the education that PetSmart provides, but they were studying beyond that. So, go figure. But I still hold myself accountable for what I did to him. I still made him develop a collapsed trachea because I used the prong collar, because I used a choke chain, because I was aggressive with him. And I never wanted to start that way. I always wanted to start with positive reinforcement. But you know what? Well, you can only get so far with free information before you actually see a professional and you learn the timing and technique.
First-time dog owners are still making today. You see, we consume the information we want to hear, not necessarily what we need.
You don't need to be aggressive or aversive with your dog. I don't care what he says, you don't need to be.
We all want things to be easy and fast, so
That's
when
true.
that information is presented, we consume it eagerly, and it's spread to even more people. And before we know it, we've got a dog reactivity pandemic on our hands. Fast forward to almost 8 years to now, and Ranger is just...
Slip lead on this dog high up and tight, not using the harness. Shows how he works. He has his little, fanny pack, treat pouch, whatever. It looks like, one of those waitress bags. Or a waitress, whatever, aprons. So he's a failed positive reinforcement trainer. Instead of actually going to school and learning how to do it properly, instead of listening to someone who went to school, who learned it properly, he just says, "Oh, I didn't actually get the results that I thought I would from free information, so I'm going to blame everybody else but myself, and that's going to allow me to make the excuse to be aggressive and use aversive methods, because I'm a failure." He did fail his dog. He absolutely did fail his dog not by using positive reinforcement, by not using it properly, and then going into the easy way of using aversives. And then going on to make his own academy, uneducated history of his, to make his own school to show you how to do the same thing and fail your dog just like he did.
about the best stooge dog you could ever ask for. And
Tight slip leads, but on every dog. This one looks like they're submissive on the side, uncomfortable, tiny little slip lead here. There's literally paracord around the dog's neck. Don't try this at home, but this is what he's doing to these dogs. High up where there's nerves, there's a lot of sensitive nerve endings. He does it like this so that way he doesn't cause the dog to necessarily pass out by having it too low. But this gets enough. This is what he does to dogs. But when the dog tries to fight it, then, it closes off their airway. Again, don't do that. Don't try this at home. Leave it to the dumb professionals to show you examples of what he's doing to your dog, because your dog cannot fight back. And when they do fight back, then they get more pain. So that's what he's doing.
Pleasure of visiting our training center, you'd be able to vouch for him.
This dog does not look comfortable. Is this his dog? Beautiful dog, but he's putting them in harm's way.
Don't worry, it didn't take us 8 years to get there. He's been a good boy now for the best part of 7 years. But it wasn't always like this. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about all the things that I got wrong and that I see first-time dog owners doing again and again. And more importantly, what I'd do differently if I could hop in a time machine and fix things. Okay, look.
I'll do a video like this of the mistakes I made with my own Shiba. I talk a lot about the mistakes I made throughout videos, but if you want to see that, then let me know. Put a carrot emoji or put the dog emoji in the comments. Let me know if you would like to see a personal video going through every mistake I made with my Shiba and how I corrected those.
Looking back, there's so much I got wrong
Look at that
in the early
cutie.
days. I'm actually amazed that things weren't worse than they were. It's tough to pinpoint exactly which mistakes led to Ranger being so reactive, but let's start with a big one. The socialization process. From 6 to 16 weeks, your dog is in what we call the critical socialization period. This phase, also known as the imprinting period, is where you're supposed to expose your dog to everything you expect them to tolerate as an adult. The whole get them ready for life thing. But
and I'm not disagreeing with him here. I disagree with the idea that people think that that's the only time you have to get your dog socialized. Your dog is continuing to socialize the entire rest of their life. They are... You have the most important fear imprint stage during that time, but you don't have to just see 100 different humans and 100 different dogs, in that period. Your dog is socializing for the rest of their life, so you can still get them used to new things, as you should continue to socialize them throughout the rest of their life, not just in puppyhood, because that's not going to... As a kid, you're not going to be experiencing everything from Mississippi here in the United States to the Eiffel Tower in France, to all over the, you're not going to go to the Great Wall of China when you're a kid just to get you over these weird things. You're not going to go to a construction site and then go in like the deep blue of the ocean or go on a cruise ship necessarily. When you're a kid, your parents aren't going to do all that to get you used to that in that short period of time that you have of where your brain is a sponge and you're absorbing everything. If it happens, great, but you get used to those things. There's many people who haven't flown for 50 years. They've never been on a plane, and they get on a plane when they're, 50 or 60 or 70 for the first time. So you don't have to believe this idea that people have made, wherever it started and why it's continuing, I don't know, but you don't have to believe that idea that you have to have your dog force them in all these situations when they're really young, and that's the only time you can do that. It's a very important time window to get them socialized, but you need to understand where you're socializing them, how you're socializing them. If you're socializing them don't go to a dog park because you don't know those dogs. You can set up puppy play groups where all the dogs are vaccinated and the puppies that are playing are all the same age and roughly the same size and the play style. Otherwise if you ever socialize your puppy and take him to a dog park where you don't know how many dogs are trained or if they're vaccinated or if they're spreading illness or what behaviors they're going to teach your puppy, they could easily overwhelm your puppy and make your puppy more fearful, teach your puppy to be a bully. Your puppy could turn out just fine, but, I don't want to take that risk. So I recommend you don't go to dog parks for socializing.
This is where it all starts to go pear-shaped. Of course, your vet and every corner of the internet will tell you
you're not allowed to take your puppy anywhere until they've had their second vaccination.
which usually happens at around 12 weeks. Sounds sensible, right? But here's the problem. That leaves you with only 4 weeks of that critical learning period to cram in as much socialization as possible. Now, the challenge here is cramming all of this exposure into a tiny window can actually end up stressing out your dog more than
Absolutely.
ever. Imagine trying to teach someone everything they need to know in life, but you've only got a month to do it.
Exactly. And a good way to be able to do this with your puppy so young is you can still take them to these areas, but just don't let them be on the ground. You can carry them, you can have them in a backpack, desensitize them to that. You can have them in a little wagon. Those are great opportunities to keep your dog safe from absorbing or ingesting anything on the ground that can make them sick before their vaccinations have fully kicked in. So those are alternate ways that you can do. Keep your puppy in a little wagon or in a basket, or carry them or keep them in a pouch or a backpack or something, while you socialize them and get them used to other sights, sounds, smells. You can worry about the ground, of concrete and graded whatnot, or escalators and stuff and elevators and all those weird feelings on their feet. You can teach them that later on, or you can go to puppy classes that do that to help you while they're in a safe environment for puppies.
For an exam the night before, except for the stakes are much
Your
higher.
little
The result,
baby.
you run the risk of overwhelming your pup with too much new information all at once.
Agreed.
What should be a positive experience into a stressful one. Now, lucky for me, Ranger is a super confident dog, so most things were taken in his stride once we eventually got out there. However, when we did hit 16 weeks, because everything was so new to him, every outing felt like a grand adventure into uncharted territory. Even if he had been somewhere before, it was still all a bit too novel, which made it harder to get his attention or engage with him during walks and training. So what would I do differently if I could rewind the clock? Well, I actually did things very differently with my younger dog, Stark. I took him out before his vaccinations, and let me tell you, it was a completely different ballgame with him. Wait until...
With a dog that young, to take him out in grass, because that's where parvo lives, and other unsightly illnesses, I think that's dangerous. I would not do that. I wouldn't have him on the ground. I would have him in a wagon. Yeah. Or take him out and put him on a blanket or something, but I don't recommend doing that. That's just me.
So that 12, 13 week mark just doesn't leave a big enough window to get things right. Now, if you're worried about your dog catching something nasty, just carry them around in a blanket. Seriously. Yeah. Although you might look like a bit of a tit, you get the benefits of your pup.
Don't be calling people names now. I mean, I guess it's my job, but I call people names that are calling other dogs names or that are mistreating animals, so I don't care. But don't be saying people look like whatever he said because they're carrying their dog in a blanket. There's nothing wrong with that. And besides, who cares what other people think? If you're taking care of your dog the best that you are trying and you are socializing your pet, nobody's going to care. They're going to be absolutely flabbergasted that there's such a cute puppy that they want to go say hello to, that you may or may not give them consent to. You have a right to.
Hearing and smelling all these new places, people, and potentially dogs. But that's my next point. So yeah, keep them off the ground, but get them out there. A good rule of thumb I give my clients is to show your puppy somewhere new every other day. The more places they see, the more normal the world becomes. Alright, now that's out of the way, let's talk about the second big boo-boo I made with Ranger. I thought I was doing the right thing, getting him to meet and play with as many dogs as possible. I figured this would make him super comfortable around dogs later on in life. Well, let me tell you, big mistake. Huge. You see, by introducing Ranger to every dog we could find, I inadvertently created this expectation that every time he saw another dog, it was party time. Dogs become an incredible source of excitement and adrenaline for him. So fast forward 6 months, I've got this 25-kilo dog that absolutely loses his mind every time he sees another dog. It's like I'd accidentally turned every dog we passed into his own personal piñata, bursting with fun and excitement. But here's the problem. When every dog is a piñata, how on earth do you get your dog to focus on you? Spoiler alert, you don't.
No, you can. You absolutely can. You just, he acts like these problems are unfixable. Look at that little husky. You just counter condition it. It's possible to counter condition this behavior you've taught, or this. It's possible to counter condition this behavior that your dog shows and exhibits, and by just increasing space and distance from other dogs, and then rewarding your dog when they're below threshold, which means that they're able to focus on you, they're able to take treats, they're not pulling at the end of the leash. You're, say, 20 feet away from a dog, and they're able to, look at you, and they can look at the dog, and they can look at you on their own, and or you can make a noise and they look at you and they're happily able to continue staring at you or work with you. You ask for a down, you ask for a sit, whatever, and you're able to reward for that. And then eventually you get closer and closer and closer until your dog can still see the dog at a range of this 5 or 10 feet, and they can still focus on you. And you may or may not allow them to go sniff and say hello and call them away. It's advanced work, but you can still absolutely do that. It's not the end of the world.
To interact with me and his obsession with other dogs, I basically cooked up the perfect recipe for reactivity. All the ingredients were
frustration,
there. A dog
I would
who's more
say.
interested in four-legged mates than anything else, and a dog that doesn't give two shits about what I'm doing. If you've ever seen Plutchik's Wheel of Emotions, you'll notice that frustration and aggression actually sit right next to each other. That's because for dogs, and us as humans, frustration can easily boil over into aggression. It's like when you're stuck in traffic and someone cuts you off. Before you know it, you're ready to explode. And it's not that different for our dogs. With Ranger, every time he couldn't meet another dog, the frustration just built up. So instead of learning how to stay calm around other dogs, he got more and more amped up. And that's part of the reason we ended up with such a reactive dog. So what would I do differently? Well, I'd still let Ranger meet other dogs. I'm not trying to turn him into a social recluse, but be a lot more selective.
I wouldn't have a dog get young out there like
social
that.
Interactions with older, calmer dogs. The goal would have been to teach him that dogs are just part of the scenery, nothing to get excited or scared about, just background noise. Again, with Stark, my younger dog, I did things differently. Anytime he spotted another dog, I made sure I became the most interesting thing to him in that moment.
That's
Seeing
good.
another
Excellent.
dog meant it was time for me and him to have some fun, not him and the other dog. The result, Stark's probably the most
I don't
socially...
recommend having a retractable leash on a regular collar because it's too easy for your dog to, if they do run away and you don't have a lock, or you do, a dog this small, like I prefer a harness on puppies and small dogs, and any dog. I prefer harness on any dog, but especially puppies, and especially on a retractable lead. That's just something that I noticed.
Stable dog you'll ever meet. Other dogs are just part of the landscape for him, like trees, lampposts, post boxes. You get the idea. So if you're raising a puppy right now, take it from me. Don't turn every dog into a pinata.
That dog had a shot collar on.
Get the idea. So if you're raising a puppy right now, take it from me. Don't turn every dog.
This dog has a shot collar on. Believe it or not, this is like, I don't know, it looks like something called the chameleon or something, so you can't quite tell that it's a shot collar because it has multiple little points. Not just one big brick, it has multiple points. So this dog is very stressed, not comfortable, squinty eyes, shot collar.
Into a pinata of excitement. Instead, make sure you're the most exciting thing.
It's not fair for that dog.
Trust me, it'll save you a lot of headaches later on down the line. With all that said, I was actually doomed from the start. That's because Ranger would very rarely take treats outside, which made training increasingly difficult. But here's the kicker. This was all down to a mistake that I bet you're probably making too. If you spent 5 minutes on YouTube looking up dog training, you've probably been told to stuff your dog's face with high-value treats just to get them
Not
to focus
necessarily.
outside.
No, nobody's saying to stuff your dog's face with high-value treats. They say to, I don't know what other people are saying. I know what I say is you reward when they give you a behavior that you want, anything that you want other than what you don't want. So depending on what you're working on, if I have a puppy, a lot of times if I'm teaching a dog to walk loose on leash, I don't use treats. I use the walk as their reinforcement. If we're working on reactivity, absolutely I use treats. I don't care about healing or any of that. I'll teach it, but I'm not into this obedience and blah, blah, blah. If we're out there and we're socializing, I'll just let the dog look at whatever they want to as long as they want to. And if they have reactivity or they show frustration with other animals, then that's when I'll use treats. Again, we're working on reactivity. But nobody's saying just stuff your dog's face full of cheese or hot dogs or anything like that. You can use your dog's regular kibble. You can use a toy. You can use a ball. You can use freedom. You can use the continuing walk. You can use real life rewards. So again, this notion that this guy is trying to, put out there on positive reinforcement people because he failed at using positive reinforcement. It just goes to show his lack of knowledge and education.
Sounds easy enough, right? Well, if you're like me, you've tried this and it worked until it didn't. You probably noticed that after
then you weren't doing it right.
Your dog couldn't care less about these so-called high-value treats. And they start turning their nose up at them, and you're left wondering what went wrong. Here's the thing.
What went wrong was you misunderstood what was the information that was being given to you, or you were looking at the wrong kind of information. So you need to go back to the drawing board, look for other people, because not everybody is the same. Contact a professional And if that professional doesn't work out with you, contact another professional or try different things. Don't just give up because you think, oh, well, my dog doesn't like this, so now this method failed me. It's not the method failed you, you failed the method. Because whoever was telling you to just stuff your dog's face, it didn't work out. Because my Shiba would always take a high value reward outside until he was 12 years old. I mean, there was times when he didn't because we were over threshold. If we were over threshold in an area where he was overstimulated, then we would certainly move away from that area, or we would go back to an area where he was under threshold and he was able to take, a food reward. For him, usually it was just the environment was his reward. He got to go sniff, he got to go walk. Like, I really didn't have to do a whole lot with him in his later years because he was just great. It was him that was great, not me. It was, I got very lucky with my Shiba that he was such a great dog, and I did go to schooling, and so I did learn to really listen to him. He taught me, before even schooling, he taught me to show him respect for a dog. So I give you something that you like, you give me something I like. You do something that seems like a human behavior that you don't care about. I allow you to do something, a dog behavior that I don't care about. Like, sniffing a pine cone for 3 minutes because it smells good, or staring at the squirrel across the street, or looking at the weird human-shaped rock formation, that you want to stare at for 5 minutes on a walk that we've gone by, and we've passed this rock formation 1,000 times before. Okay, go ahead and do that. That's just what I think.
Those high value treats aren't high value at all. They're just temporarily high value because of the novelty. But as we know, novelty wears off around day 3, and voila, your dog no longer gives 2 shits about food outside.
Well, this dog is clearly over threshold, so that doesn't count.
But completely ignoring you. So how do we use positive reinforcement when our dog is constantly turning their nose up at food?
Then you weren't using positive reinforcement correctly. You were over reinforcing. Your dog is over threshold. All those dogs there were way over threshold. So he's using this as a gimmick way to tell you positive reinforcement doesn't work because he didn't know how to do it right. It didn't work for him because, again, he didn't know how to do it right. Positive reinforcement works for everyone if you know what you're doing. He didn't. So he acts like the method failed. Again, he's not holding accountability to himself at all.
Well, first we need to get our dogs working for minimum wage. And I know it sounds
no.
Imagine that spoiled kid that finally gets...
Dogs, just because you reward them, are not spoiled. I mean, my Shiba was spoiled, but, he deserved a great life because he was a great dog and he put up with my human antics. He ate a raw diet. He was, I gave him everything that would, keep him healthy and happy, and he wasn't spoiled. So this notion, so instead of using treats because it didn't work for him, or because he doesn't work for minimum wage, he makes, I'm sure, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. I don't know. I don't care. If he makes $2 a year or $2 million a year, it doesn't matter. He gets to do what he wants when behaving with animals, such as using this. So instead of using positive reinforcement because he doesn't know how to, he uses this. He resorts to this. So the dog goes from positive reinforcement to now positive punishment, negative reinforcement. Positive punishment means when you do behavior I don't like, I correct you. You get a pop. If I want to teach you to sit, I apply this for negative reinforcement. This is negative reinforcement. I apply this, and as soon as you sit down, I release that. That's no way to live. That's not respecting your dog. That's just failure.
It's their first job. They've been handed everything on a silver platter.
And your dog is not a human.
Shelves for less than £10 an hour. Well, that's exactly what I did to Ranger. He had a buffet of treats anytime he wanted, and I was essentially paying him a ridiculously high salary.
Okay, so if he has treats all day long every day, then yeah, that makes sense. But positive reinforcement trainers are not telling you to do this. If they do, then they're not a good trainer. But those are just the poor trainers. Even Zak George doesn't tell you to do this. A lot of times he says that when he was rewarding his dogs, a piece of chicken or whatnot was like the size of a grain of rice. Okay, and he used play a lot and rewards. But this guy hates Zak George because whatever reason. He doesn't like Victoria Stilwell because positive reinforcement, maybe he looked up to them, and positive reinforcement, he doesn't know how to do it, so in his mind it failed him.
Of jobs. No wonder why he's always asking.
So those are tricks.
What else have you got? Eventually,
not
I was spending
actual behavior.
A small fortune on these gourmet mini burger treat things, and sure, he'd eat them most of the time. Some of the time, rarely. But the moment another dog appeared, those burgers might as well have been stale bread. I was following all the.
Well, if he doesn't take it rare, if he only takes it rarely, of course he's not going to take it when he's over threshold, when there's another dog there. This guy is trying to hold the treats accountable. He's holding the trainers accountable, the free information accountable, the other dog accountable. He doesn't hold himself accountable that he messed up. He says, I failed my dog, but he's not actually taking accountability for it.
Yet it still wasn't working.
He's just building his case for the excuse as to why he uses these tiny slip leads and shock collars with dogs that he trains. He's building the case to make this justified.
Beyond frustrating. What I wish I had done was put Ranger on a minimum wage from day one. His daily food portion would go straight into a treat pouch, and that's all that would pass his lips. This essentially recalibrates your dog's food motivation, making them more likely to take food outside.
There's nothing wrong with using regular kibble, but the fact that he's like, no, you're only going to get this. I'm sorry I ever spoiled you because I'm a spoiled brat myself, and so I'm going to blah, 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 blah. I can do whatever I want, but you can't. So I'm going to make you work for human behaviors for pretty much for free. All you ever get is your own kibble that's the same flavor, that's the same food, dried up kibble, that you get every single day. You don't get anything special now because I failed you. So you have to pay. He's not holding himself accountable. The dog is now being held accountable for his failures.
Guess what? That's exactly what I did with Stark. Now, that's a dog that'll practically take your fingers off half a piece of kibble, making him an incredibly easy dog to train.
He's a Malinois. It looks like he's a Malinois. Or he's not. He's a shepherd. It looks like he's pure blood, probably a Malinois shepherd, and those dogs are easy to work with because they've been made to work with humans. He's not a pity mix. I'm not saying that pitties aren't easy to work with, but they have a different mindset. I mean, it just... All right, let's move on.
Of work ethic. Without it, you'll have to motivate your dog in other ways, which isn't ideal.
God forbid you actually have to move and do work for your dog.
Chocolate isn't a treat if your diet consists of nothing but chocolate cake. You're not going to rush home to eat a chicken breast salad if you're stuffed with cake.
So he, again, is saying he failed his dog, and so his dog has to be held accountable. Because he overused the treat form of positive reinforcement, and now it meant nothing because his dog could get it all the time. I mean, I gave Adonis treats a lot, but I still made sure that he wasn't just eating cake all day. Don't blame the method. Don't blame, the dog. Blame yourself and fix it yourself. It doesn't mean your dog has to pay for that. It doesn't mean your dog now has to have just regular dry-ass kibble all day. And then that's the only, when they're used to being able to have a nice treat now and then. I mean, God forbid you actually do work and work around your dog.
To be honest, can you imagine how unhealthy it would be to only eat chocolate cake? So if you're struggling to get your dog's focus outside, take a step back and reassess how you're using treats. Put your dog on minimum wage and you might just find that suddenly even the simplest of rewards become worth working for. Alright, let's dive into the fourth and maybe most important mistake I made with Ranger. This one is so underrated, it is insane, and following the next piece of advice could save you from literally being bit in the arse later on down the line. It might sound trivial, but if I could go back and change one thing, it'd be this. Using a house line. Now, if you've never heard of a house line, it's basically a leash that you use inside the house with your dog.
Okay.
And trust me, this is by far the simplest, most effective way to interrupt bad behavior and guide your dog towards good behavior. If you're not already using one, you should be.
I will agree with him on this, that yes, when Adonis was little, he pretty much lived on a leash, on a harness, until he was about 5 or 6 months old, because he was either tethered to a piece of furniture, and he had his little setup there, or he was with me on leash. I do agree with this, that yes, having a house line, as he calls it, I wouldn't have it around the collar. Again, I don't like collars and stuff and dragging leashes on dogs. I'd rather have it on harness. But that is a very helpful piece of equipment you can use to prevent your dog from getting into things. Not necessarily to use it to correct him, to pop him the way he does, but you can pull them away from things you don't want them to get into, tether them to either, Adonis had a little plastic crate, and I just tethered him to that, indoors, of course, and where you can tether them to a piece of furniture or tether them to yourself. That way they can't get to something that you don't want them to have. Or you can keep them from something you don't want them to have.
You're bound to get a few things wrong. Maybe it's chewing on the skirting boards, having a little nibble on your fingers.
And it's not them doing something wrong. they're doing something natural, and they just live in a human world. And so the human has done something wrong to leave it out for the dog to then chew up, and then the human gets upset. So it's the human that did something wrong, not the dog.
Incident in the house. That's all totally normal. But here's what we know. Any behavior that goes ignored is likely to get worse.
That's true.
And you don't want it to get worse. Trust me. Ranger was no different. He tore up carpets, skirting boards, rugs, kitchen furniture. If it could be destroyed, Ranger was on it. No matter how much I tried to distract him, he was more interested in redecorating the house than anything I had to offer. And not only was this incredibly annoying, but what I realized now
It's your
is
fault.
that every time he ignored my pleas to stop, he was essentially learning how to ignore me everywhere, including outside. With a house line, your options are pretty limited. You can bribe your dog away from the naughty behavior.
It's not called bribing. It's called redirecting. So again, he failed with positive reinforcement, so he wants to badmouth it at any chance he can. It's not bribing your dog away. If you do it properly, you're redirecting your dog, and then you're preventing your dog from continuing that behavior. Either with the house line being a leash, tethered to you or tethered to a piece of furniture, putting them in a puppy pen, putting them in a crate, or putting a baby gate up so they can't get to the counter, whatever they're trying to do. You know, you pick up the house, you keep them with you, and you manage that behavior. And over time, that behavior goes extinct because they no longer practice that. Versus if you just ignore it and they keep going on the counter and finding invisible chicken up there.
Which actually just reinforces it. Or you could use harsh punishment to deter it, but that's not nice and it risks damaging your relationship.
It's not healthy either.
Or you can grab them by the collar, drag them away from it, which is super intrusive and ultimately creates a lot of conflict every time you try and touch them. Probably the number one reason I see people get bit later on down the line.
Agreed.
So here's maybe the simplest but most effective piece of dog training advice you'll ever receive. If your puppy gets up to no good, use the house line to interrupt.
No, I wouldn't say to interrupt it because he's probably going to use it to correct the dog. I would just use it to prevent the dog from getting to that behavior again. If they're, in something, then you're going to take it. You can call it interruption, where you take the leash and you lead them away. But sorry, I heard a noise over in my closet, and I instinctively think it's Hermes because that's where he lived, but he's not there. He's passed away. For anybody who still doesn't know, Hermes is my ferret. So I would use it as just a way to redirect them, just walk them away from it. You can call that interruption, like a positive interrupter, but in his case, I see it as it's being defined as a correction.
Behavior. Count to 4. And guide them towards something positive to do.
Okay, so instead of guiding them away, to me, I see that translation as you pop them, you correct them, count to 4, then you lead them to somewhere to do something positive. I would just immediately take them and walk them away from there and immediately take them to something positive. You don't need to, in my opinion, I don't see a point in counting to 4. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's beneficial. Maybe it's not. I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily count to 4. I would just go get their leash and just immediately bring them over to an area that they have their toys and everything, and they're on their leash, so they can't get to wherever it was that they were previously, and then I would take care of that area to keep them from, wanting to make that a draw, so it's not a draw, so they want to go over there.
For example, if they're chewing on the rug, gently move them away from it with a house line, count to 4, place them on their bed with a chew toy instead. If they're going at your hands like a little piranha, stop them with the house line, count to 4, then give them a Kong to gnaw on. This super simple method can save you so much grief later on down the line. It's like setting a foundation for a house. You get it right early on and everything falls into place.
Sure.
But ignore it and you'll be patching up cracks for years to come. Ranger taught me that the hard way. So
that was his video. I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know what you think of this video. If you like this guy, then, go support him. If you like my videos, then any support is always appreciated. Hope you all are having a wonderful holiday weekend. And for those of you who just have a regular weekend, then hope you have a wonderful weekend. Go say hi to your little critters. Say hi to for me. Give them some kind of love and they appreciate. Until next time, practice peace, patience, and positivity.